So I thought I'd start off sending you all to sleep with a history of the Constitution. And actually I thought this was actually quite interesting because I've been interested in actually looking up the exact details of this but never really getting around to it. And tomorrow, with about an hour before I had to leave the office, I thought I'd better get something down in PowerPoint quick, and I started exploring. So the first version of our Constitution was formally adopted 12th of July 2009, and we needed that to submit to the Electoral Commission. And then our second version was formally adopted 9th of May, and I'm getting all this from the wiki, so if the wiki's all wrong, well, it's not my fault. And the third version, question mark. So, voting is opening today, I hope.
Yeah.
So, a little bit more details about the first Constitution. So we required it to submit to the Electoral Commission, so we could actually register as a political party. And there's quite a lot in there, so I'm not going to cover it. But the interesting bit for this presentation, at least, is 8.1. That amendments come into force after the approval of a majority of members who vote in a ballot, blah, blah, blah. But intervals no more than 7 months. So that meant every 7 months we had to stop everything we were doing and have a discussion about the Constitution. Or worse, not stop what we were doing, have a few people who weren't really elected to do it, have that discussion on their own and have something happen. And then have a vote on it. So I'm not quite sure what would have happened if we didn't even bother to have that process. You know, if we decided there were no changes, but we hit that 7 months mark, what happens? So we decided that, well, when I say we, a few people decided that this wasn't really the way we ought to go forward. So when we hit that first 7 month process, it was decided, well, we have to do this again, and then again in another 7 months. So some clever person had the idea of remove that clause and replace it by electing a group of people whose job was to potentially continually consider the Constitution and to change it and update it whenever it was required rather than every 7 months. So the clause we saw earlier, 8.1, was removed, and these 3 new clauses were added. So, not going to read them out. So, this second version of the Constitution created the board. So 12 governors were elected on the 18th of July, and I've ripped this straight from the blog post, so these names are in no particular order.
Wave, guys.
As I say, if you are on the list, yeah. So, you know, I could see if I could take names. Do we have Lucas here?
No.
Okay.
Lucas never said the first thing, and Tim was quick. Steve, you're here. Will Toby couldn't make it. Finlay is here, of course. Graham couldn't make it. Sean? No. Luz, of course, everyone knows. Me. Jack Walnut. Will. And Mark.
And just for the sake of the audio recording, I'm not just standing here awkwardly doing nothing. Peter Brett was talking at the back.
Thank you.
You may well have been picked up, but I just thought I should mention it so I don't look stupid later.
He wasn't.
He was, excellent. He just read out names and people put up hands. There we go. So, after we were all elected in, there was, a little bit of administration, setting up a mailing list, etc. And I skimmed through to find the earliest post related to constitutional amendments. And there was an email from Graham Lambert, 22nd of July, with first suggestions for some amendments. Or rather, a link to a pirate pad with some suggestions. So I think that's kind of the first point at which the board started working towards amendments. Although I should caveat that by saying that various other people, Andrew Tyndall particularly, did have a wiki page with amendment suggestions in there 4th of June. So that's actually before we were elected in. But official business began on the 22nd of July. So 18th, 22nd, that's how quick we are. Although we haven't actually put any votes out yet, so let's just go doing a thorough job. So I suppose in some sense the board is just a subcommittee of the membership tasked to work on constitutional alterations, and this is an alternative to the 7-month cycle. But the point is anyone can propose amendments, so it's not just restricted to the board. If you've got some ideas, just because there's a board, it doesn't mean you're excluded from the process. But also the 8.3 had this clause of other governance responsibilities. So it's a bit vague and woolly, but it was put in there as a very quick fix of the board will have other duties. But the idea was the board would then be responsible for proposing amendments to the Constitution and could work those out. So what is the amendment process? There isn't really an amendment process until we actually start creating one. So we kind of just worked on an ad hoc basis thinking what made the most sense as we were doing it. And as it's turned out, it's an extremely lengthy process. It's not necessarily designed to be as lengthy as it has been, but we're all sort of new to this, so I think that's made it take a little bit longer. So it all starts off with propositions for amendments. So I've phrased it in such that there's a proposition of the amendment to the board, but that proposition can come from anywhere. So that's followed by internal board discussions. And then we decided that we wanted to then go through consultation processes. So we thought, do it as several stages. So consult internally in the board, step 2, then pass that on to the NEC for consultation. Because it's important to note that the NEC are responsible for the day-to-day running of things, and in their day job of running the party, or is it night job, they will actually come across lots of situations where maybe they find there's flaws in the Constitution. So they're actually an important part of the process. I'm not saying they have more to suggest than normal members, but they may be more likely to come across things that they want to suggest. So we thought the first barometer of whether amendments were good or not would be sending them to the NEC. And there's no reason why at any stage in this process new amendments can't be just slotted in. So it's a very fluid process. So after consulting with the NEC, there's another round of internal board discussions. So this is designed that if the NEC have said, no, that's all rubbish, that we can then sit back and think, well, okay, we thought it was a good idea to start with, they think it's rubbish, what's going on here? Maybe we need to review things, maybe we just need to go ahead and ignore them. But there's a process by which we can discuss what the NEC think before then going to the next step, which is consulting with members. So I'll say it will usually occur, we've only really gone through this process once now, and we thought so far with the process it's all been taking place in mailing lists or in back rooms, as it were, slightly away from the membership. So we thought the best way to resolve that situation was then to have on the forum a Board of Governors board into which all the amendments can go so that any other member can go in and have a look. And we started off by having this forum private just to the governors, and that's partly where we had our private discussions about amendments. But at some point there was a decision made that having all this private from the members wasn't a good idea. Our reason for doing it was to head off objections to ideas before we discuss them, because if an idea gets proposed and then amended to something different, there's no point having lots of people see the initial idea and have a really strong objection to it before we decided that we also had a strong objection. So it was trying to tone down harsh reactions to things that we hadn't actually decided yet. But I think we've now decided that that forum is just going to become visible to everyone always, and we'll just try and edit tweak the edit privileges. So there'll be a stage in the early process where normal members can't edit but can observe our processes, and then when we go to consultation with members, it's just opened up and anyone can get in there and post their ideas and feedback.